Mercedes just pulled off the most controversial engine move in modern Formula One. And the FIA let it happen. This engine is technically legal. But under race conditions? It transforms into something else entirely. We're talking about hidden power. Invisible on paper. Impossible to detect during inspections. And worth up to 4/10 per lap. That's 17 seconds per race. 17 seconds? From a thermal expansion trick buried inside the engine block. Now here's the problem. Ferrari says it breaks the spirit of the rules. Honda calls it a loophole. Audi? They want the entire engine banned. And Toto Wolff? He says if the FIA dares to change the rules now, Mercedes will take them to court. This isn't just a protest. It's a political war. And the real explosion hasn't even started. Because in Bahrain, under desert heat, that same engine will run in front of the entire world. And if it works like it did in Barcelona, Formula One may never look the same again. But why did the FIA approve it? How did Mercedes hide it in plain sight? And what made Toto Wolff go ballistic behind closed doors? Stay until the end. Because the last detail explains everything. And once you hear it, you'll understand why this scandal could change the next 5 years of Formula One. Now subscribe. Because what's coming is bigger than anyone expected. The controversy started with one number. 16:1. That's the new compression ratio limit for every Formula One engine in 2026. Every engine, every team, every lap. The rule was simple. Keep the compression low to limit combustion power, and force teams to rely more on electric energy. But Mercedes looked at that rule, and found a way to bend it. Not by rewriting the rulebook, but by understanding it better than anyone else. Here's where it gets wild. The FIA measures compression when the engine is cold. Room temperature. A static test. But Formula One engines don't race at room temperature. They run hot. Over 100 degrees Celsius in some parts. And when that happens, metal expands. So Mercedes did something no one else thought of. They designed internal engine parts, specifically engineered to expand at high heat. Microscopic movements. Less than a millimeter. But enough to increase the compression ratio back to 18:1. That's the old power limit. Restored, secretly, inside a regulation-compliant engine. And that's not all. They even added a pressurized microchamber near the pre-chamber spark plug. A technical move so precise, it only works under race conditions, not during static tests. Which means, it passes every inspection, but delivers more power when it counts. Ferrari is calling it a violation of intent. Honda says it's an unfair advantage. Audi? They're saying what everyone's thinking. If this is allowed, the championship is over before it starts. But here's what most people missed. This isn't just clever engineering. It's a direct challenge to the entire measurement system of Formula One. And the FIA's response? Might be the most controversial ruling in years. We'll get to that in a second. Because before we look at the FIA's decision, you need to understand why this trick is more dangerous than it seems. What Mercedes built in Brixworth isn't just powerful. It's political dynamite. When the news broke inside the paddock, there was chaos. Ferrari, Honda, Audi, they were stunned. They thought the FIA would shut it down immediately. They thought the trick was too obvious to survive. But what happened instead shocked everyone. The FIA ruled the Mercedes engine legal. Not temporarily. Not under review. Fully compliant. Why? Because the test procedure hasn't changed. And that's the catch. The rules say compression is measured when the engine is cold. Not hot. Not mid-race. Not in real conditions. On paper, Mercedes passed. By the book, they did nothing wrong. But in spirit, they shattered the entire point of the new regulations. And that's where everything flipped. Ferrari called an emergency meeting. Honda submitted a formal complaint. And Audi? They threatened to walk away entirely if the FIA didn't reconsider. Meanwhile, Toto Wolff was watching it unfold. And when he finally spoke, he didn't hold back. Get your act together. That's what he told the other teams. That's the polite version. Because in the original quote, he used words that don't belong in an FIA press release. He said teams were too busy writing secret letters and holding private meetings, instead of building better engines. And then he dropped the bomb. If the FIA changes the rules now, Mercedes will go to court. They'll sue. They'll fight it legally. And they'll win. Because the engine was presented early, tested openly, approved by the FIA itself. And behind Toto Wolff stands Ola Kalinius, the CEO of Mercedes-Benz. The man who holds the money and the power to take this fight to the very top. If the FIA bends now, they won't just lose Mercedes. They might lose the trust of every manufacturer in Formula One. But here's where it gets worse. Because the other teams are planning something dangerous. A full protest. Right after the first race in Melbourne. And if that happens, this won't be about engines anymore. It'll be about who really controls Formula One. And the clock is ticking. The problem isn't just what Mercedes did. It's what happened next. Barcelona. 5 days of private testing. Quiet. Controlled. No live cameras. No broadcast. Just raw data. And from the very first session, one thing was clear. Mercedes wasn't struggling. They were flying. Over 1,100 laps. No mechanical failures. No reliability flags. Every run, clean. Every system, stable. Teams expected chaos. Instead, they saw a machine. Not just a fast engine, but a finished product. And that raised the biggest red flag of all. Because no one else was ready. Ferrari? Barely managed under 1,000 laps. Audi? Still ironing out basic integration. Red Bull? Over 400 laps behind. But Mercedes? Their W17 ran like it was mid-season. Efficient. Polished. Untouchable. And then came a surprise. Because the fastest lap of the week didn't belong to George Russell. It wasn't set by Mercedes. It came from Lewis Hamilton. In a Ferrari. 1:16.3. Just 97 thousandths quicker than Russell. But enough to shake the narrative. If Ferrari was that close, was the engine trick really making a difference? That's what the headlines said. But what they didn't say is where the real advantage lies. Because what Mercedes showed in Barcelona was not raw speed. It was consistency. 500 laps. On the new hybrid systems. Multiple race simulations. 0 failures. And then, McLaren. The most dangerous part of this story isn't Mercedes. It's the team that beat them, using their own engine. McLaren, reigning back-to-back champions, showed up with the same M17 power unit, but better chassis balance, better packaging, better deployment. And they ran a shadow program. Fewer laps, but targeted ones. Energy management. Overtake systems. Long runs under heat stress. The rumors say McLaren simulations showed a potential gain of up to 0.2 in boost mode under Bahrain temperatures. And if that's true, then Bahrain won't just be about Mercedes' engine. It'll be about which team uses it better. Because right now, Mercedes might win the legal war and still lose the championship. And that's the irony. Their trick, their power unit, their invention, could be the very thing that hands McLaren a third world title. Unless Ferrari ruins the party first. And that's coming next. Because what the Scuderia is planning behind closed doors isn't just a protest. It's revenge. Ferrari isn't new to this game. They've been burned before. And they haven't forgotten. In 2019, when their own engine skirted the fuel flow limits, the FIA cracked down mid-season. No protest. No formal proof. Just a quiet investigation. A sudden rule clarification. And boom, performance vanished overnight. Back then, they weren't just penalized. They were humiliated. So when Mercedes showed up with a legal loophole in 2026, Ferrari didn't see innovation. They saw hypocrisy. And this time, they're not backing down. Behind closed doors in Maranello, a new strategy is taking shape. It's not about beating Mercedes on track. It's about breaking the advantage politically, before the season even begins. First, they formed an alliance. Ferrari, Honda, Audi, 3 manufacturers, 6 teams, half the grid. Their message to the FIA is simple. If you don't fix this, we will. They're not just sending letters. They're gathering legal teams, digging into homologation processes, challenging the very method of measurement. And most of all, they're preparing a formal protest. But not yet. Not in Barcelona. Not during private tests. They're waiting. Because the moment that really matters is Bahrain. Under full scrutiny. Under race conditions. Under the eyes of the world. They want the proof to be public. The performance to be undeniable. And the outrage to be global. Then, and only then, they'll strike. But here's the part no one sees coming. Ferrari doesn't need to win the protest. All they need is to create enough noise, enough doubt, enough political chaos to force the FIA into a corner. Just like they did in 2019. Just like they know how. Because if the FIA blinks, if they even hint at a rule change mid-season, Mercedes is in trouble. And if they don't, Ferrari is prepared to escalate. With their own legal case, their own PR war, and a direct challenge to the FIA's authority. This isn't just about horsepower. It's about control. Who writes the rules? Who interprets them? And who decides what counts as fair? But here's where it gets even riskier. Because the FIA didn't just approve the engine. They also knew about the loophole months ago. And that changes everything. The FIA is supposed to be neutral, objective, above the chaos. But behind closed doors, the mood has shifted. The ruling on Mercedes' engine didn't just settle things. It ignited them. Because the more you look at the documents, the more one thing becomes clear. They knew. They knew about the heat expansion. They knew about the design. They knew how it behaved under race temperatures. And they approved it anyway. Why? Because technically, they had no reason not to. The rules say measure the compression cold. Mercedes passed. But now, with Ferrari, Audi and Honda circling like sharks, the FIA is trapped. If they admit the loophole is real, they'll have to explain why they didn't act sooner. If they stand by their ruling, they risk half the grid walking out. So in the first week of February, while teams were still packing up from Barcelona, emergency meetings began. Quiet, unscheduled, unrecorded. Sources close to those meetings say the tone was tense. Some engineers demanded immediate rule changes. Others pushed for thermal testing. But one proposal stood out. A new measurement system. Post-race compression verification. Randomized checks under operating conditions. It wouldn't affect Bahrain or Melbourne, but it would send a message. The FIA is watching, and they're not afraid to adapt. But adapting mid-season? That's dangerous. Because if they make the wrong move, Mercedes is ready. Toto Wolff's team has already consulted legal experts in the UK, Germany, and Switzerland. And above him, Ola Kalinius, CEO of Mercedes-Benz Group, has made his position clear. Change the rules retroactively, and you face a courtroom. Not just a sporting appeal, a corporate lawsuit. And when a global company like Mercedes sues the FIA, it's not just about racing anymore. It becomes a war of governance, of image, of who really owns the sport. The FIA knows that. Liberty Media knows that. And right now, every decision is walking a razor's edge. But there's one more twist. Because while all eyes are on the FIA's next move, there's a growing suspicion that another team is using the same trick. Only, they didn't pull it off as well. And that team is Red Bull.